Welcome everybody to Write Better Together. I'm John Myers. Hey, look everybody, it's Emily Brooks.
Hello, John Myers.
Hey, in a previous episode, I made a joke about only murders in the building with two old guys and a young Selena Gomez. And this is the episode, part 2 of an episode where there's two bald guys and a young Selena Gomez, who's actually Emily Brooks, who's actually the daughter of one of those people. There were people that thought you were my daughter too at WriterCon.
Oh, that's so funny.
So speaking of getting out of the bubble, so what are we talking about in this truncated mini episode that's part 2 of your dad's talk?
So it is part 2 of our talk. It is the continuation of the conversation, which rhymes. And so we're going to be continuing to talk about the vital role of indie artists.
Let's so I almost said I don't like that we're calling him your dad. I do like that we're calling him your dad because you have a good relationship with your dad. But tell us, he works for Sony, a division of Sony.
Yes. So hopefully you're listening to this after listening to the first episode because it's going to start right in the middle of our conversation. So, but yeah, so Dr. Dean Diehl, who was once Dr. Dean Diehl, I don't know if we mentioned that. That was confusing for everybody. Author of Crawl, Walk, Run, a book about starting your own small business. He worked at Sony for about, he said 35 years, and was most recently the VP of marketing and strategy. He now teaches business, music business, entrepreneurship, and the like at Trevecca Nazarene University.
Excellent.
Where he was Dr. Dean Diehl for a year.
Awesome. And we talked about, I don't remember if this is on this episode or even if it was on an episode, but the three of us talked about, I actually wrote a screenplay about the first, it's a fictional person, but the first female sociology professor who became a dean, and her name was Philly Dean, and so she was Dean Dean. So I got to tell Dean about Dean.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So how did you get out of your bubble?
I went to WriterCon. Did you?
Yeah. So it's funny because the time of recording this is just weird. Like, we're going to be talking about this for the next, it's going to seem like we're going to talk about it forever, but it's because it just happened for us. But then some of the episodes we're going to be talking about it in are coming out much later.
And it did not just happen because there is no such thing as coincidence.
No, I mean, just recently happened.
I know. I'm just teasing. So, there was a tie-in with WriterCon with your dad that we didn't know when you got on the plane with your husband and
Yes.
and when this is the third time I've been there and I've heard this woman speak, future guest of the show, her film that she wrote crossed the eyeballs of your father.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Years ago.
Yeah, so someone that we met, are we going to say names?
Yeah. Future guest Renee Gutteridge.
She was talking in a session, a very good session, by the way, and we need to have her talk about it because it was so good. But she was like, and then I wrote Family Camp, and I was like, I actually picked up a pen and wrote this. So sorry, Renee, we were passing notes during your session.
Notes in church.
But I just wrote, my dad helped with Family Camp.
Yeah. So, and no one knew that. God knew that connection would be there. We human beings did not know that on the way there.
Yeah. So that's one of the things my dad has done is he doesn't work on the production of films, but Sony, he's in the music division, but they developed a inspirational film division. And so he was helping out with that and strategy and marketing.
Can I tell my favorite moment and then let you say what your favorite moment is, or you want to say something else?
Sure. I don't know if I have a favorite moment. You go ahead.
My favorite moment, and so many things happened that were not by coincidence.
We've talked about this.
So many things happen. But here's my favorite moment. This picture right here that I'm gonna post up here when we do this is a panel that was not scheduled because unfortunately the guy took sick, and so we had to fill in for him. But a panel with celebrity screenwriter Bob Sines. I haven't called him that for a while. Road comic, memoirist, world philosopher Barry Friedman, and then Emily and myself. It was on nonfiction, and I have pictures I have to send you that I grabbed out of someone else's video. I just love when he's like handing you the transponder thing, and it's like he's imparting his wisdom. It looks like you both have on the same yellow jacket, which is interesting. And I think
I
yours
don't
was
even have a yellow
no, yours
jacket.
was actually white or cream, but in this picture it looks yellow. And but it's like he's imparting wisdom upon you, like intergenerational wisdom, and he's sharing his gift with you. And I just love I love that whole moment. And then I got to point out to the crowd that was there that, and they didn't know, but Emily and I knew that we had traded an episode with William Bernhardt
Oh
on
yeah.
his podcast of WriterCon, and we traded Bob's episode for Barry's episode.
Yeah.
And then we were all in the same room. And like
It was
that
great.
could like there that is not coincidence. Like God had to orchestrate all that for that to happen. And Barry thought it was wonderful and wanted to know when he was going to get paid for that. For that trade.
That's funny.
What was your favorite moment?
My favorite moment was the friends I made along the way.
Aw.
But really, like, I was thinking about all my favorite moments, and it was like just those small like connections.
There's so many.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, we got out of a keynote, and then we went to go sign our book, and the keynote speaker was sitting right next to me, and I got to talk to her and buy her book. So like moments like that.
And she was so genuine.
She all of them, everybody was so nice. And then the other moment that came to mind was when we were teaching our masterclass on how to start a podcast from scratch, and we dug out of each person there what their sole like reason for existing was, and then helped them make a podcast out of it. It was really neat to see that happen in people, and they were like, this is why I want to do this, and this is the people that I like, this is the person I want to reach.
The thing that drove them, the thing that drives them, not some big generic garden of books stuff.
Yeah.
That little thing,
but like very specific things that drove them.
And I got to do that with David Corbley afterwards, because he was in a different masterclass, so he didn't get to do it, and so I got one out of him.
I'm so glad you guys got to do that.
Yeah, it took an hour, but I got one out of him, and so now he's going to have a podcast. So we helped launch 6 or 7 podcasts, and some of those people will be on the show once.
And when their podcasts come out, they're going to tell us, and we'll let you all know when that happens.
Yep, awesome. Now,
all right, here is the rest of our conversation with my dad, Dr. Dean Diehl.
Dean.
Ultimately, you're building the eyeballs off of something other than the content that you're asking them to invest in.
Last summer, the 2 of the top 10 New York Times bestsellers were people from Book Talk. Then it was their first book.
Yeah. So we got them the attention, and then people said, I want to read their book because I learned about them through this. That's fascinating to me.
And it can also underscore their expertise in something. Like, so one of those was like female empowerment, and this is how you can be women, and so she's established herself as an expert on social media. So of course everyone wants her, all of her followers wants her first book, because she's speaking to her own followers.
Which brings up that a lot of this like platform discussion is especially true of nonfiction writers. They do care about fiction writers, but it is the nonfiction publishers are really going to care a lot more because they want to make sure that you have people who already respect and value your input. Another thing, if I can just, something that was on my mind during this is, there was a woman who came and spoke at the Tennessee Writing Conference, and I don't remember her name, but I'll put her in the show notes. And she was talking about marketing your books. And what was surprising to all of us was all of the information she gave applied to authors who were working with traditional publishing. And she was saying, like, make sure you have $1,000 budget, make sure you do all these things. And we were like, you're traditionally published. And she was like, yeah, but unless you are like, it was kind of like you were saying, Dad, about you have that tier. Unless you're in the top tier and that's where they're putting all the money in, you're not getting a ton of money and help from those traditional publishers anyway.
Right.
And I know, and I feel like that's what traditional publishers really offer is money, because you don't have to invest in anything yourself except potentially your marketing if they're not putting that money in. Like Brandon Sanderson. You're welcome, John Myers. I brought up Brandon Sanderson, tick that off the bingo.
That's so rare.
Brandon Sanderson talks about not getting hardly any help from his publishers, and he had to book his own book tour.
Yeah, I hear that.
Obviously, that was before, but
I'm already doing it myself anyway. Why do I need a big house?
Right.
Well, and I think there are reasons, depending on what your objective is. Going back to where we started with this conversation of the idea of an art form needing a robust professional domain and a robust amateur domain, and then this middle ground of the indie, and where do they go? There's a place for all of it. And one of the things you can tell a healthy art form is when it's not all hobbyists. My light, something weird's going on with my light. When you guys go back and watch this later, it's going to look like there's lightning coming off. Like, look at, man, he's so on fire. His lights are sizzling. There it goes. It's like, it's like that. I promise I'm not sitting in a thunderstorm that you guys don't know about.
You're at Universal Studios with the lightning and the monster.
Exactly right. Twister. There's a twister about to come in, and now special effects. But you need these healthy domains at every level. When the professional domain takes on too much weight, you can tend to become very utilitarian about writing, where the sole value of a work of writing is the amount of revenue it can generate. And definitely that can happen. I've been in conversations at record labels where you feel like that's the case. You can also get so artsy where you start to go, well, I don't care if anybody can read this or not. Kurt Vonnegut's book, Timequake, has this great moment. It's kind of autobiographical. And he talks about his brother had his nephew just dump paint on a canvas, and he showed it to Kurt. He says, "Is this art?" And he said, "Show it to an audience and they'll tell you." Exactly. This idea that I don't care if I have any readers, I'm doing my own. It's like, well, that's probably too far to the intrinsic side, But overall, what you want is you want a healthy balance across all of it, so that the writer that writes, for just purely intrinsic reasons has ways to find fulfillment in that. And then the authors that are serious about having a massive career and millions of readers and stuff, there's a place for that.
Yeah.
I am going to be electrocuted here in the next.
Oh my goodness.
We had a whole episode about that because Rick Rubin thinks, how dare you consider the audience?
Yeah.
Right? And then Jacob Collier is the other side of the equation, where you think of the audience at the moment of conception. And so we had a whole episode about that. But that leads to, if the indie... Okay, so this is still true from my undisclosed location. When I drive to Chicago, there I won't go over the bridge that goes over the Ohio River. I won't go over the pay bridge because I don't think I should have to pay to go over that bridge. So I go through downtown and I go on the little bridge through downtown Louisville.
Sort of political, but not.
I'm also very cheap, so it's not political. And but on those street corners in downtown Louisville, there are still people selling their cassettes and their CDs. And so, first of all, I don't know if that's true in Nashville where y'all are, but there's no one selling their books on street corners. And so, I guess online on their own website is that version of the street corner. So how can the indie artist move a music? I mean, they can move a music scene by having 7 different people selling their cassettes on 7 different corners in Louisville, and then it's harder to budge a publishing scene or trend because there's no one. Oh my gosh, I'm going to answer my own question. I'm sorry.
I want to hear.
So respond to my answer. So there's no one doing that. However, I believe that the future of screenwriting and storytelling, because that industry is contracting, the future of storytelling is performative memoir in a 99 seat theater, right? And so if I'm going to tell stories, I can go, anyone can rent a theater, and anyone with the right marketing can book 99 seats for one night only in St. Louis and in Cincinnati and in Boston. And
that's exactly right.
And so that's kind of the version of going to the street corner with your book, because then you meet everyone afterwards and sell your book afterwards. Oh,
yeah,
so.
You got to think about event marketing. You know, the nice thing about music, well, 2 things, big difference about music and books. People are reading less and less, and so that's a challenge. And then you got AI out there writing books, which you guys should do a whole episode just on that. But in music, I can make you fall in love with a song in about 30 seconds.
Right.
It's hard to make somebody fall in love with a book. I mean, I gave War and Peace 300 pages, and I was like, if there's not war or peace in the next 100 pages, I'm going to give up. But not many people will do that. It's like, I'm 5 pages in, nobody's died. What are you making me read this? And so it's harder to make people in on a book, whereas with music, you can do it so fast. Our products are fast. And then we've got this live event strategy where that's really the core strategy. Most artists only record music and distribute it so they have an excuse to tour. And I think that in the same way I tell my artists, if you're going to be a successful artist today, you have to build a relationship with your listeners. You can't just sit in the studio. You got to get out. You got to play shows. I think if you're going to be a writer and you're going to cultivate eyeballs on your own in the hopes of moving on, you have to come up with event strategies, which, again, I applaud you very much, John, in particular, for helping introduce Emily to that mindset of you've got to participate in events. You've got to get in front of people. You have to build relationships, because ultimately what's going to make me take a chance on a song is I heard something I like. What's going to make me take a chance on a book is probably going to be a connection. It takes a while to build a connection with the book. I'd have to almost build a connection with you first. And so I think, John, this idea of a live event strategy, it doesn't always have to be live events around publishing or writing. It could be, like something that like Emily writes a lot about anxiety. It could be moving from writing about anxiety to talking about it.
I was going to use that for an example that Emily, you've known her longer than I have, would say, who's going to come see me in St. Louis? Well, they're not going to come see Emily Brooks the first time. The first time they're going to come see you talk about anxiety. The second time, after they bought your book, at the first time, then you have to do 2 shows because you'll sell out the first show right away. And so I have a friend, and she speaks on hidden disabilities and invisible disabilities, and her rate card's great. and she has more speaking engagement offers that she doesn't ever want to turn any down, but she just has so many of them that like I'm only one person. I can't, and I need rest too. And so they come to the topic at first, and then they like you, and then they come to you.
No, I think that's good, and I think that we've solved the issue here now. So this is what everybody needs to do. If we're going to have a robust indie book publishing industry and a way for people to find a path into larger publishing deals, they've got to develop a robust live event strategy.
So Emily, I booked you a theater next Saturday.
In an undisclosed location. You have to find it.
No, I kept it in our own city. So you're at Belmont somewhere.
For some fiction examples, recently at Northwind Manor in Nashville, they did an event for, oh no, I'm going to forget the name of the book. They had a book release, and it was swamp themed because the book is something in the bog. And so they had like swamp decor, and they had food related to swamps. And then another thing that I've seen is people doing parties like related to other books in their genre. So it's like, you're a big Cosmere fan, let's have a Cosmere party. And then also I'm an author and I've got these other books that are similar. So you can do things fiction themed as well.
Yeah, we used to use house shows a lot. Where you've got when you're trying to break an artist and you've got a hardcore fan in a city that you can't get dates in yet, and have them host a house show and bring you in, and you do a little private show, and they bring in a group of people, and they choose the people that come to the house show carefully because they're influencers, not just regular people. And we used to use that strategy a lot. And I could see similar things happening, when someone does tell you they like your writing, they like your work, they like what you have to say, to think about how do you incorporate that into some sort of a strategy. And this is more than marketing, though. This is part of the intrinsic good of being a creator, is being able to share your thoughts, your ideas, and who you are and what you've learned and your experiences. It's just, I think a lot of writers are more comfortable writing about it than talking about it. And I think that's a hurdle that writers need to look at. I have a lot of artists that don't want to do social media. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do it. One of us has to do it. I vote you because they don't care about me. You want me on your social media telling them about your new song? I don't think so. And so it's like, if you want to be an artist today, you have to be comfortable doing social media. If you want to be an author, maybe you have to be comfortable being a speaker.
There's this is the last thing I'll say, but there's a great episode on Thomas Umstedt's podcast about building your platform in person.
Yeah.
And then he has one on alternatives to social media, like instead, like you said, like making friends with influencers. And so I'll put those in the show notes.
Yeah. Influencers are a big deal because it's not as saturated as social media. Right. And anytime we can get somebody else to talk about us, it's going to have more impact than us talking about us.
Yeah.
So I heard Emily give me the code word of this will be the last thing I say. But I have a last question, but I want to ask you a question about the house shows. So in a house show of 50, is that a normal size for a house show?
20 to 50. Yeah, they're small.
And then, so how many are influencers in 50?
There's no formula, as many as you can get. You know? And I don't mean like YouTube influencers. I've got this big. I'm talking about people that are in positions of influence over the kind of people you're trying to reach. So in my case, where we worked in faith-based entertainment, if you're inviting 20 people, if 2 or 3 of them were youth pastors, that would be really helpful.
Right.
Because they've got influence over the kids we're trying to reach with this particular band. And so it's different. If I'm sitting there and I enjoy it and I go home and say, that was a great band, that's nice. But if I have influence and then can say, I want that band to play for my youth group next Wednesday night, my youth group's got 200 kids in it, I just turned one person into 200.
Right.
So it's not just the influencers with social media influence. It's people in a local market. Now, in music, we tend to think about cultivating one market at a time. I tell my starting out artists, you need to think and act like a local artist in as many markets as you possibly can get to, enough to think and act like a local artist. And I would set a goal of having 12 to 15 markets I said, if you can play 60 shows, 4 shows in 15 markets is better than 1 show in 60 markets. Keep going back, keep cultivating the same markets over and over again, so that you become that feel of you're one of us rather than this person that flew in, dropped your event, and then you're never coming back.
So friend of the show, Daphne Ekman, she's really big musician, artist, where they sell out Maryland, Boston, like all up there in the Northeast. Well, so she did a house show in Nashville, and for 50, so that's where I got that number 50. And but I didn't realize that a percentage of them were influencers. So that makes total sense, because she had never been south of like Pennsylvania or something at that point. Yeah. And so
usually there'll be a booking agent sitting in there, someone that's would be able to book her in the future. And a lot of times, if we did one in Nashville, we would totally stack the deck, because we would be able to pull in all these different people, and it would become kind of a house show / showcase type of a thing.
They do those at Northwind Manor a lot as well. Speaking of Northwind Manor,
cool.
And they usually have an artist that's a little bit more well known, and then they have a newer artist.
Is that Andrew's thing?
It's Andrew Peterson's.
Who was an artist?
Yeah,
it's like he learned that as a musician.
And he
was on my label, by the way.
He's what?
He was on my label.
Yeah, so he's cultivating this artist community outside of Nashville, and it's very neat.
Cool. So my final question is, if you're so first of all, Emily and I, we need to do an afterthought about why we wrote the book. And,
we do.
And because it's for different reasons, and you and I have never even talked about that. But so if you're an intrinsically motivated person, you want you're doing it for your own betterment, you're doing it for betterment of your community. What do you do with extrinsic, countable, hard things like awards, reviews? Those, I don't know. Does your book that I hold up, has it had bad reviews? I don't think it has. I looked, I couldn't find any.
You can't find any reviews. Yeah, that's
if ours
the worst review you can have, actually.
if ours gets bad reviews, Emily won't read them. She already barely reads our comments because she's afraid someone's gonna say something bad on YouTube, and so she misses the good ones. And but so I tell her the good ones, and we don't get bad ones anyway. But anyway, so what do you do with review? Like what do you do with things that aren't intrinsically motivating in an industry, if you're in that industry and you are intrinsically motivated? What do you do about awards and reviews? Well, if you got a bad review, Dean Diehl, what would you do?
So I'll be as careful as I can with this answer, but I have to get theological for a minute. In creation, God looks at all that he created and said, it is good. Only God can say that creation is good, because only God knows what he intended. And so as creators, we are the only ones that can determine if our work is good or not, in the truest sense of the word good, because only we can know if we created what we set out to create. Everything else has to do with, did other people like it? That's a different issue. If you create something and you created what you set out to make, and other people don't like it, then you have to face, do I want to keep doing things other people don't like because I thought it was good? Or do I want to pursue creating things that other people think is good? And I kind of do agree with Rick Rubin a little bit about being overly in the creative process. I believe when I tell artists about writing songs, I'm like, have a listener in mind. Who do you have in mind? And write that song to that person. But that person can't be a radio programmer. That person can't be a critic. That person can't be a publicist. It's got to be the person that you want ultimately as your audience. Now, if the people that you want as your audience tell you your stuff's not good, you got to listen and work. And here, are they talking about my craft or my art? And there is a difference. You know, it's like when you get a review. I remember when I bought this. Here, I'll attack you with a phone case. When I got this phone case, I was reading the reviews on it and said, this phone case was stupid. It didn't fit my phone. Well, that's kind of on you. That's nothing wrong with the phone case. There are complaints you get where it's like, well, someone listened to the podcast I do called This is the Good Life with Dean Diehl and Steve Hoskins. It can be found anywhere podcasts are.
There you go.
Yeah. But on This is the Good Life, we had someone go, well, you guys need to talk about Jesus more. And it's like, okay, obviously you listened to 5 minutes of one episode and decided that's what you wanted to say. So you have to decide as the creator which comments you're going to allow in and which ones you're going to allow to bounce off. You can't just say, I'm going to ignore all negative comments. And you also can't take all negative comments at face value. So you have to have that sensitivity of, all right, this is legitimate. I need to pay attention to this. This is stupid. But it takes, you know, if you're very sensitive, like what you're describing, John, it could be tough.
So when it happens, I'm cherishing it. I'm looking forward to it. So Bob, friend of the show, Bob Sines, screenwriter. I don't know if there's 500 reviews of his book, and there's 2. Every time he gets a 1-star review, his first one, he frames it and puts it on the wall in his office. And I think that I lean more in that way, other than I wouldn't waste the money to print it. I'll bookmark it, I guess.
Well, we want to move people. We just don't always move them the way we meant to.
But,
yeah, and I think
to leave people with. Here's the thing: you want to have a small group of people love you, then make everybody like you, because we give our time and our attention to the things we love, not the stuff we like. When was the last time someone came to you? I read that book. Yeah, it was okay. You should read it.
Yep.
No, we talk about what we love and we talk about what we hate. And most writers that struggle in this area are ones who are unwilling to commit to making a smaller group of people love you. They want everybody to kind of be okay with you. And you can't do anything worthwhile without offending somebody. Not today.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I probably offended somebody just now.
I want to keep going, but we'd have to already split this into 2 episodes, I think. What do you think, John Myers?
I've disappeared from the frame because I'm plugging in my laptop. It hasn't been plugged in this whole time.
That's a good way to know when you should stop, when your laptop dies. How long are your episodes? 1 battery. 1 laptop battery long.
I'm wondering if I have time to ask or to mention one more thing, but
You would think it wouldn't be hard to plug in my laptop. It just took me 20 minutes. There you go. Now it's in. All right. Ask your thing.
Are you getting the flashing battery? Was it flashing?
No, it just the power saver comes on and it gets dim.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I knew. I forgot to plug it in. We're transparent on this show. No, ask your question.
That was
Final
more of a
question.
comment.
This is our 3rd final question, everybody.
No, I should.
No,
It's gonna be. It needs to be an afterthought.
Okay. Call to action. I bet one of those is coming.
Well, yeah, I think we did a call to action, which is think about what a live event strategy might look like for you as a writer. And it may even be, if you're not comfortable speaking, it could even be that you take an audio book version of your book and do a reveal of a chapter, have people come over and listen to a chapter of your book and serve some stuff. But I don't know. It's like, how can you engage people in person about your work and about your art and cultivate that following through events?
That's excellent. And so, listeners, shout out your ideas to us for that and put that in our show notes. Our show notes can be found at writebettertogether.com/podcast. We also have a page dedicated to just call to actions called writebettertogether.com/ all hyphen the hyphen call hyphen all the call to actions with hyphens.
There'll be a link in the show notes, as she said.
Yeah, link in the show notes. You can also respond to our, like, whenever we share this episode on Facebook or Instagram, we'll find you somehow.
So we made it through the whole episode, and he didn't do any of his funny voices.
You knew about the funny voices.
I know that you make Winnie talk sometimes.
Yeah. I started doing the voices because we homeschooled, and my job was reading. And so I would read to the kids every night. And part of the homeschool philosophy is you're always reading to them 2 to 3 grades higher than their own reading level. And I'm reading late at night and they're falling asleep. And so I would bring in all the character voices. And I started doing that. It was Redwall.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when we read Redwall?
Yep. And I remember the sign of the Viva.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And man,
It's actually a book, by the way.
Yeah, it is a book.
So, you know.
I mean, we could have like a whole conversation about the importance of reading to kids and like how that influenced me as a writer.
And the importance of reading above your, like I even do that with my college students, the importance of reading above the level that you're at, the +1 level, because I wrote one of my college dissertations on that.
Oh,
nice.
That's good.
Very cool. I love
Well,
that.
when you talk about,
we share that in the show notes.
you talk about an art form and the importance of the art form, the reader, the listener, the viewer. What we love about art is that interaction between the person that creates it and then the person that experiences it. Great, real quick story. Dan Hazeltine from Jars of Clay had written this song, and this lady came up to him and after a show and was like, I absolutely love in this song when you say this, changed my life, and completely butchers the lyric. And he was just like, that's so awesome. And he looked at me afterwards and he said, I never want to put the lyrics in our booklet because I don't want to lose that moment. What she heard was more important to her than what I said.
Wow.
And that's such a good example of the listener participating with the creator. Because like I can read what Emily writes, but I'm bringing to it my experiences, my vision. I'm picturing something in my mind that may not be what she pictured. And for me, that is her world she just created, the Moss and Mountain world. I've got that in my head as a place that is probably very different from what you create. It's why I'd be curious to see Tolkien, if he could react to Peter Jackson's movie and go, is that what you pictured?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also an example of something we talk about, we need to talk more about on the show, but we've talked about a little bit in the past of one person makes a difference. So that one fan has impacted product for the rest of Jars of Clay's life. And one person, one comment totally changed their product.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Crazy.
Because we're all in this relationship within an art form. We're all in this conversation with each other. And the publishers do have a role, but they can't have the only role and they can't have the only voice. Yeah. Or else the art form is diminished.
And we're back. Your dad is so smart. Like,
yeah, he is.
He knows. But here's what I want to say about that. Because here's his book, by the way. Here's his book here.
And he's working on more books, by the way, all the time. He is a writer. We didn't talk about writing with him, but he's a writer.
That's true. That's because this really is secretly not a writing podcast. It's a what drives you,
yes,
and what keeps you going podcast. So he really didn't deny his expertise, did he?
No,
he was comfortable, like Dr. Cindy and like a handful of our guests. He's comfortable with, I've done this for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. He's comfortable in that. And it's not bragging. He just knows his stuff because he's done it for 10 years. And I just love that watching it again for the second or third time. That's what I love about it, is there's this quiet confidence that it's just the words that come out of his mouth are facts, right? And if there is an opinion, he'll say, "No, this is just my opinion." But there's like a very specific line between facts and opinion.
Yeah. When he, this is me telling stories on him, but when he was writing his doctoral dissertation, he would put in a fact and then be like, "You have to cite that," and he's like, "I lived it."
Oh, I love that.
But he still had to cite it because until you get your doctorate, you're not an expert, quote unquote. But yeah, he did live a lot of the things in his dissertation.
Yeah, I love that whole thing.
I was laughing when we jumped on again because we had just closed with me saying, "Here's Dr. Dean Diehl."
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are so many Diehls at Trevecca in the faculty and staff that so every year the students put on their own Friday Night Live, and they did a skit about it, about how many Diehls there were.
Oh, I thought it was going to be called Deal or No Deal.
Maybe it was. I wasn't there. But what was funny is I'm like the secret Diehl. They didn't even know about me. I'm like this. I'm the one that's just hiding in there. They don't even know.
You've infiltrated them.
Yeah.
Just like Carrie Droven.
Yeah. Good callback.
Cool. Secret deal. Anything else you want to say?
Thanks, Dad.
Aw. Thank you, Dean Diehl. Professor, full-time Professor Dr. Diehl. I have one more thing I want to say.
Okay.
We couldn't have done it without you.
We couldn't. Oh, man. We couldn't have done it without you.